Take all those master modes, scope lint, instance locations, and any other specific features in Star Citizen that rub you the wrong way, and get ready to sit with them. Not only do I think that's the opinion of CIG making Star Citizen, I think that's how most players feel at the moment about Star Citizen as well. They just want a game. For a long time, CIG has proposed they are working towards that, without making a lot of notable progress.
Anyway, so in this coming year, we were sort of showing you what we're going to do. So we are going to have the pyro system next year.
Now that 4.0 has landed, things have changed. This latest red take released for my supporters at the end of 2024 is a look at the changing nature of Star Citizen and a couple of things it seems players will have to come to grips with to simply get a game of any sort. If you'd like to see these videos when they are first published, you can join our Patreon or YouTube channel members below to get a monthly exclusive video every month. If you already have, thank you for supporting my Tomato Talks. One topic of a decent amount of discussion is instanced locations. With hangars, things made sense to most people. Large locations would simply need to instance themselves in order for there to be enough landing spots for the whole population. This would also help with keeping the amount of objects, cargo, and picos that were loaded in at cities and space stations down to a minimum in the main game space. Habs, expected to come with building interiors, also made sense, mainly for the same reasons. But this last CitizenCon has introduced instance sections of the outside game. Well, kind of. See, these first instance locations are actually the sewers of Area 18, so still a city location, much like hangars. But the point of these instances in a gameplay location as opposed to hangars or habs is the same point that it's done in other games in similar locations, to allow players to experience a more curated piece of gameplay an unlimited amount of times that can play out differently, but still takes place in a controlled environment, that is to say, not with annoying people trying to kill you. This model of gameplay and format of the game world will not stop here. I have no doubt that various levels of building interiors will also be instanced. Underground facilities will be instanced in some ways too. Now, this does not mean loading screens are being used. You don't see any loading screens when you're entering your hangar, which is already an instance location. But it does mean a separate location in which the overall simulation may or may not be affected by it, while being closed off from it. Taking this a step further to fleet battles, as being mentioned in the Star Citizen 1.0 panel at CitizenCon, entire space-based areas can be running separately from the PU around them, possibly unseen by those in transit in the region. Now, I'm not sure how far this goes, but does this kind of thing mean if there's an interdiction field within an instance, that a hauler or transport ship flying through that interdiction field won't actually be affected because it's not on the instance? These kinds of things bring up more questions than they answer. And the specifics of how this will all work are still up in the air at the time of writing, which is in November of 2024, but it's safe to say these instances are a bit different than a full reliance on server meshing as many players expected. This isn't my opinion on whether this is a good or bad thing for the game and how it could affect the amount of content they'll be able to fit in unique locations by doing this, but I do think it is worth considering. Even if this is a technical limitation, it is likely a move that needs to be made in order to ship the game. Because CIG clearly wants to ship the game, and every now and then trade-offs will have to be made to make that happen. Some of these trade-offs are a little more background and less obvious, and some of them are a bit more in your face. If there's one thing that I am admittedly quite tired of talking about at this point, but keep getting brought back into, it's master modes.
Yes.
Not just because it has been discussed across our content over and over and over again, and in other content over and over and over again, but because it's a small part of an overall shift in Star Citizen's flight model. See, master modes is only dictating the function of switching between two different modes of travel and the limitations on those two modes. While this has been seen largely from the dogfight and combat perspective, there are other complications to this switching between two modes, like quantum boost. Regardless, the flight model is made up and surrounded by more than just master modes. There's several different segments, like control surfaces, the resource network, and capital ship combat. Each of these variables needs to be made to work with hundreds of ships and the incessant catalyst for destruction known as the gamer brain. It's a complicated thing to try, and it's a bit of a moving target with the fact that a lot of these features are ongoing in development or not even structured in the game yet. And when you look at each of these elements, you can see where sacrifices needed to be made to account for these complications. Look at hover mode in 2019, a one-size-fits-all design for ships hovering in the game. Undoubtedly a placeholder until something better came along, but it didn't last. It was unceremoniously cut from the game for good reason, and the idea was binned until later, with John Crew, head of the vehicle team, saying the following.
The old hover mode, that sort of tried to solve the problem in a different way, and it was the right idea with not quite the right implementation.
If you want to know more about it, I did a whole video on this, but ultimately the better system we were waiting for is control surfaces, a natural aerodynamics-based simulation of ship flight. This does not use a one-model-fits-all style of development, but allows another part of flight to be made a little more difficult and necessary to master, in line with the rest of the overall flight model and small changes that might be made, like master modes. But then there are other changes like this that went the opposite direction. In Alpha 3.10, all the way back in August of 2020, when new Babbage was just being added to the game and Levski was being removed, we saw a few flight-focused updates. Turret and gunnery improvements, thruster efficiency curves on ships, new targeting behaviors for ship HUDs, and something called high-speed combat. This was a focused effort from the team to create vulnerabilities in ship systems at high speeds to encourage players to fight at lower speeds. Not only is it helpful for performance purposes in the game, when it came to gameplay, players would get stuck into jousting or flying back and forth past each other very fast over and over, trading a couple shots before hurtling off into space again. Now, Chris Roberts loves his cinematic chase scene style ship flight, so the team was determined to meet the need, or answer the call, I guess, and make it happen naturally. Unfortunately, a whole 13 updates after this, it still hadn't worked. And eventually, we saw the opposite phenomenon of what happened to hover mode. A one-size-fit-all type of solution was placed on all players and all ships across the board. The resource network likely could have worked as a tie-in to all things master modes, the idea of switching modes and disabling systems given the mode, and would probably solve a lot of the problems seen currently if implemented in a systemic way, but that possibility has never been brought up by CIG themselves. And that's what makes this final example a very we're just going to deliver the game kind of decision. Rather than continue to mess around with natural deterrence or spend a ton more dev time roping in a game system like the resource network that might not work exactly how it's needed, CIG has defined the way things will work, and the game will ship around it. Luckily, this is still an active development project, and CIG is still taking and implementing feedback on the feature. But Master Modes is here to stay, because Squadron 42 and Star Citizen need to get a move on. And while Master Modes is not the entirety of the flight model, it is clearly a very in-your-face part of it. And while CIG has clearly shown that they're going to work with the player base to try and come up with a solution that works for everyone, on this aspect of things, CIG has spoken. These are just a few examples of the subtle ways Star Citizen and the company behind it are making small tweaks, concessions, and design changes to ship a proper, fun-to-play and engaging game that can rope in elements from the space sim genre. It will always be a war of opinions on how far each aspect of the game should go to offer a fully featured simulation, and as always, I'm interested in hearing what you have to say in the comments. But honestly, I think most of the discussion and debate that happens is from the minority of players, the more extreme opinions. And while those debates are necessary for a healthy community, I do think most folks are just here for the vibes, the good times, and a growing space experience. If you enjoyed this more in-depth development dive, I make these exclusive videos monthly for our supporters to offer a different view of Star Citizen development that you've shown clear interest in. Along with that, supporters can get behind-the-scenes looks, exclusive chat rooms, live podcast access, and the referral code in our randomizer under every video. Thank you to all who have chosen to support us, it means a lot. To everybody else, I hope you learned something new in this video, and I'll catch you in the next.